This week's Brew with the coach's question comes from Pete Walker. Right, Pete's question is a bit specific, but I know I'm not the only one with this issue. On all the really long hilly ultras I've done, I've had issues with lower shin, top of the foot pain, tendonitis. The longer the races, the worse it gets, to the point where every step is completely agonizing. Oh my goodness, I've never done a race where it's like, I'd say an injury or something, an issue was agonizing. This is hopefully you get some help. Pete is doing the Lakeland 100 in the summer and really wants to avoid it becoming a horror show like last time. Oh my goodness. Any suggestions for things to do in advance and during the race? Oh, wow. Hopefully we can help Pete. What do you think, Rebecca?
Yes, he's absolutely right. It is a common issue that we see quite a lot. People finishing ultras with pain in that particular area, or sometimes it's quite florid. You can actually see some changes of the skin colour over the top of those tendons, quite red. And basically, it's just repetitive picking your foot up. So the tendons that are affected are the ones that run down the front of your leg, go across your ankle into your foot, and they help us raise our foot up. So point your toes back towards you. And you just do that repeatedly on ultras, and particularly rocky ultras, going over tree roots, things like that. Anything we have to pick your foot up that bit higher as well seems to make it worse, I think. And it's just the friction of those tendons moving up and down, up and down, up and down the whole time. They get fluid around them, that then compresses them, causes pain. And that's what you're feeling, is that sort of additional fluid and the inflammation in and around those tendons. It's probably mostly affected in people whose tendons have already got some sort of underlying issue as well. So if they've got tendinopathy, and that basically is where you've got some disrepair of the tendon. So tendons are like cables, lots of different fibers, and it's where you start to lose those some of the fibers. The tendon hasn't quite got the capacity it used to have. So by the end of a long race, it's working really, really hard to keep that movement going, and therefore it just breaks down a little bit more and it causes the discomfort. What can we do about it? Difficult if it comes on in the race. You have to kind of just get on with it, because we can't use things like anti-inflammatories. If you've listened to previous podcasts I was involved in, things like anti-inflammatories are completely no during the race and for that short period of time afterwards as well. So ice, things like that can help. But essentially, it's getting our muscles in the right sort of condition, and the tendons particularly, prior to the race. So if you've had this before, my advice would to see a good sports physio who is used to dealing with this sort of problem and can give you some very, very specific exercises to strengthen, particularly tibialis anterior muscle and the extensors of the big toe and the rest of the toes as well. So there's some very specific TheraBand type exercises you can do. Some things even with a kettlebell, sort of lifting your foot up and down from a seated position, things like that. They're all sort of exercises with a trainer. Obviously, it's a bit dangerous if it drops off. But yeah, so that's the high end level. But yeah, so you gradually, progressively load it under sort of supervision from a physio, because you need to start off low with that sort of thing. But if you know you've got that as an issue, then I would put some dedicated strength work into looking at that prior to the race. And you've got a bit of time, haven't you, before Lakeland? So, but get a diagnosis and see a physio, definitely. Yeah.
I've seen this quite a few times, actually. So I saw it a lot in the army, and actually quite recently, I think it's one of the primary injuries that they get on speaking to someone who's physioed on Dragon's Back from last year. One of the primary injuries they have is this, essentially. And from what I've seen, it generally happens when people, now Pete hasn't talked about how much elevation training he does, but generally when there's an increased, the load is too sharp in your training generally. So you go from you're increasing that load too quickly, and obviously you're not having time to adjust to that. So I don't know how much elevation Pete does or how consistently he does it. But from what I found in clients and also in my own personal training, like when I was in the army as well, I used to get that a lot when I was doing a lot of things called this thing called tabbing, which is like really fast walking with boots. And you get that injury a lot, and it's because you're not used to it. So as Rebecca said, you do need to build up that load, and you do need to do it progressively. So I would say the key thing is, even if you're getting out hiking in the hills, that's all going to help that build. So I think that when I see that injury in people, generally the trend is they've not been consistent enough with their elevation training or consistent enough with their load.
another big thing is not tying your trainers too tight. If you're doing a massive, I know that's silly, but if you've got your feet will swell during an ultra, especially if it's like you're looking at plus, 24 hours, is actually loosening your trainers. You might start with them a little bit, but looking at the way that the laces lock and how they're tied as well.
I think heel lock lacing, is maybe got a bit to answer to this, because I think that obsession with trying to get your heel as far back in the shoe and everything rammed down on top of the front of the ankle to push it back, I don't think particularly helps either. So yeah, I'd definitely agree with that. Is look at that and look at how that affects you, and if you can afford to loosen it off without causing other problems, then probably it's the best way to go if you know this is an issue for you.
Especially maybe later on in the race, having a little if you get to Delmain halfway at the Lakeland 100 and you've got a little checkpoint, you've got your drop bag there, either go slightly bigger trainer, or just a note to yourself, make sure that you loosen. You're going to be moving a little bit slower then as well. So if the trainer is a little bit looser, it's perhaps not as vital to be locked and you're not doing a fell race by then. You ever had this rustle over all your mountains?
Yeah, I hear about this one a lot, and I've also had it. I definitely agree with all you guys. Like Trish said, the magic pill that I found is going out walking in the hills. So doing the intended motion at reduced intensity, so you can feel for yourself, is that a good pain that feels like not even like a pain, but like it's helping work the area? So if you have active rest, it helps stimulate blood flow through the tendons and gets the nutrients in there and helps that recovery process. And so walking in hills is amazing. It's incredible how often I can set that as an actual session. The other big one is sleep, and it's kind of like frowned upon because it's a bit boring, but getting your 8-hour sleep, that's when all the human growth hormone and all the good repair and recovery happens, and you have to make sure you're getting that proper full cycle of sleep too, not just on screen 5 minutes before going to sleep, but getting your sleep admin put in place so that your body gets all the time it needs to go through its recovery process naturally.
I love that idea of load. Yeah, tendons love load, don't they? Getting the load right can be tricky, and loading the load. This is always the so hard bit, isn't it? Is like learning to manage the load, and okay, it can take that much load, and now I need to back off, but it will take more. You're piling on layers and layers and layers. And I like the idea of walking for any of these. I think it's highly underrated and used.
Massively underrated, yeah.
Trish is walking in the mountains, and it's so good because if you've got family or a partner or you're going to go somewhere, walking, bit of a pack, your poles, and it's such a good change to the body. And let's face it, over a hilly 100 miles, we're all going to have to, even Russell would have to put a few steps of walking in. If you can. I'm sorry.
It's one time.
Cut, Gary. Cut that bit out.
I love it when people promote sleep, though. And it's almost like I feel sleep is it's part of my a positive aspect of training now. If I get a good 8 hours and I wake up and I eventually check my Garmin sleep score, my heart rate variability, if that's all excellent and stuff like that, I think this is awesome. But maybe 5 years ago people weren't really talking about sleep as a positive, having such a positive impact on training. But 100%, Lakeland 100, most people will be doing quite a bit of walking during that race, so don't feel like walking is not training. It's probably quite old-fashioned to think that 13 weeks, I think, roughly between now and Lakeland 100. So
you've got this, Pete. You've got this, Pete.
Good luck.
Good luck.
And hopefully we bump into each other in Coniston. We've got good stories
whining,
not horror stories.
Whining at Delmain.
Harry will be whacking his shins with his poles just to eliminate.
I know that tendonitis pain though. It's so all-consuming when your feet hurt, isn't it? It's so hard to focus on anything else. Almost any other pain you can run around, but foot pain is really hard to manage when you're tired because every single movement hurts. So do some pre-work and hopefully it'll be better this time. Let us know.